Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Ready to hop in and talk some Battlefield. And today we're talking about our thoughts on the release schedule for Season 7 of Battlefield 2042, as well as recapping the year. So let's jump in. We did it. We survived another year of covering Battlefield 2042 on the podcast.
Just
barely.
We just barely made it, but
we did pass the 2-year mark.
I know, that's actually mental. Like, that is still mind-blowing to me how quick and how slow this game has gone. Like, it feels like it was just yesterday and also 10 years ago at the same time.
Yes. It's been 84 years. Yeah.
But it's been a fun ride, that's for sure, yeah.
Fun is definitely one of the adjectives that I would use. Both fun and exciting, stressful, infuriating at some points. But I had a great time. And I do we're going to talk about our thoughts on Battlefield 2042 and 2023. Well, that's a mouthful. But I'd say it's been a pretty good time. I've really enjoyed it. But first, let's talk about Season 7 of Battlefield 2042. It's actually going to be happening, and it is going to release in March. And I think they're aiming for a late March release date because that's what they typically do.
Yeah. Generally seems as though it's like the last 10 days or so of... It almost feels like it's pretty much the last week, usually.
Yeah. Let's see. If Season 6 came out in October, we've got October, November, December, January, February, March. By the time this comes out, there will be 6 months in between from the kickoff of this update to the next season. 6 months. That's just insane.
That is meant. Like, I already knew it was a long time because I think we initially, because the season itself is 4 months, so we kind of knew that was going to be a bit longer than normal. But 6 months, holy, that is that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I got some thoughts on that.
I think it's crazy when you actually look at it. Obviously it'll end up being like 5.5 months, I think is what it would actually be in like weeks, but like we're gonna round up to 6 months because that makes it sound even more intense. But yeah, 6 months, 5.5 months. Choose your specificity there, but it's been it'll be quite a long time in between updates. They're doing a bunch of holiday stuff right now, which is fine. It's not going to necessarily bring people back to the game, I don't think. It's definitely for people that are keeping on consistently playing the game, for sure.
Yeah, personally, for me, I don't know. I might come back and see how it goes, but I haven't played in... I don't even know, like probably 4 to 6 weeks at this point, and it doesn't really... I mean, look, that mode that they shared where it's like 28 freaking elves versus like 4 soldiers or whatever, that kind of looks kind of fun, but yeah, I don't know if it's enough to really bring me back, so it is definitely... And with that being said, I don't want that to come across negative because I do think still that's worth doing for the people who are still playing. Like, you got to do something, so even though it might not appeal to bring people back, it's still a positive, and it definitely looked fun. Like, even if I don't play it, that looked really fun to me. So yeah, at least they are doing something.
It's definitely unique. Earlier today, I was watching a video, and it was definitely one of those YouTube channels that is not like politically incorrect at all. They just were very harsh in terms of their discussions around game development in 2023, or just modern game development in general. And I say they weren't necessarily politically incorrect, but they were on it because they specifically blame the developers rather than the actual corporations and the systems that were set up within those corporations. So I think he was definitely directing it more at the developers, who typically don't have a whole lot of power in those efforts.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it was a very great discussion piece in the specifics of that video, but his whole point was in 2023 in the late or the early 2020s, this new period of gaming that we're in, this modern generation of gaming, game development companies are making games not to be fun, but to fill out numbers on a spreadsheet. They are making games that fulfill the largest number of ticks on a checklist than they are about making something that is actually fun. And I think the video itself wasn't well put. I think the point that he was trying to get across was good, which is game companies now, using the example of Halo, using the example of Battlefield 2042, using a lot of these examples of games now where it is more focused on fulfilling a checklist or a spreadsheet than it is actually on making something fun. And I think if you look at Battlefield 2042, specifically when it launched, I don't think you can find a clearer game than that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I feel like it's turned too much towards the money, and I understand it's a business, and I understand that no matter what. Well,
video games are this weird place where it's like business meets art.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's weird because like I feel like this doesn't happen with movies because that's the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, to an extent it does.
Movies benefit from not having to be fun. Like, not every movie has to be fun, but video games intrinsically have to be fun.
Yeah. I think the thing with movies is that they all know to make their money on a movie, it has to just be good. Like, they just have to make a high quality movie. It doesn't have to be funny or whatever the case. Look at a movie like Oppenheimer, right? That's made, I believe, close to $1 billion. Yes. On paper, that's a pretty boring movie. Now, I think it's one of the best movies ever made, but it's pretty boring. Mm-hmm. There's not actually that much that happens, but it's just a damn good movie. Like, it's just made so well. And what happened? They made $1 billion on it. So I think it's just weird to me that the gaming industry should look at it like that, because it is the same thing. Yeah. Business meets art, because a movie is arguably more art than a freaking game, but they seem to know how to do that. Now, there's examples of clearly them just like the sequels, right? They're not that good, and they clearly brought them back because they just know there's a fan base there. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the same example of like that is them just trying to make money. I don't think they necessarily made the sequels to try and make, great art. Not to say all the people involved weren't. I'm sure the people who worked at Lucasfilm and all that were very keen on making a good piece of art, but I think the higher ups just want the money, so it does still happen, but I think it's just so much worse in the gaming industry, and I don't really understand why, to be honest. It just, I don't know, maybe because there's more money in it, that maybe more people flock to it, like the big CEOs and all that flock to it to make their money, or I don't know.
There's a shift going on with this idea of content. There's this really good video essayist named Patrick Williams. Patrick H. Williams, I think is, great discussions. And he did a video on this idea of movies and film and TV being changed to content. It's no longer we're making a film, we're making a piece of content. We're not making a movie that connects with another movie. We're making a cinematic universe. We aren't making, it's changing the definitions of a lot of the terms and how things typically work. And then on the flip side, you look at the death of AAA is what people are calling it, with the massive layoffs that are hitting the game industry, the change in the economics around video games, the missing middle, something that is definitely happening as you get a more developed economic anything. You get more cheap things and you get more expensive things. There's no budget good product anymore. It's either you're going to go for the moon or you're going to make it back in the amount of people that take part in whatever you're offering.
Yeah.
And I feel like the video game industry is hitting that. And it's also hitting this maturity part. Like the tech industry came from business that has evolved over time for both good and bad. And if you look at video games, they never had that. Video games were, we're not going to be the man. We're not going to be corporate. We're going to take away all the things that you typically think of as corporate America and tech and big business and all that stuff. And now we're really seeing how things aren't going that direction anymore.
It's gone completely the opposite way, pretty much.
Yes. They need that unionization, for example.
Yeah.
They need the opportunities for them to actually be real businesses rather than having a live service game and only being able to fund that because investors see live service and they're like, this is the big thing now. Let me throw some money towards a live service game. PlayStation, Sony, they tried doing that and then they realized, hey guys, actually that money doesn't really add up, and the live service version of whatever the Last of Us multiplayer game was going to be shut down because they knew they couldn't sustain it and actually it be good.
Yeah, they literally said that they had to like pretty much
they would have to make their studio
a live service studio just to sustain one game. So it's like it is mental how that, I never thought of it that way, that when gaming started out, it was this little niche thing that like game devs and gamers themselves were, it was almost like this is our cool little corner of the universe and we just want to keep this to ourselves and just make cool nerdy things and we all have fun. That was kind of what it felt like. And now it is like not that at all. It's like arguably the most mainstream, like everyone plays games now. Literally, I don't know a single person who doesn't, even just on your phone or whatever, like everyone, even my mum plays like games on her phone like that. I never would have thought that would be the case, but everyone does it now. So I guess with that attention just has to come that like corporate side of it, which is a shame. But I just wish that they could try to balance it more because we've seen it. Like, I don't know how many times I've said this on the podcast too, that if you just make good stuff, the money will still be there. Like, that's the part that annoys me, is that they focus on
you have to do, obviously, you're not just going to be able to make something great, put it out with no marketing and it do well. But if you want retention and if you want a quality and name for quality, you need to put something out that is good. There's that video I was talking about, they use the example of No Man's Sky, how No Man's Sky promised the moon, and even after all the 10 years of updates or whatever it ended up being, it's still not that great, like in terms of the mechanics aspect. Like, they added a lot of things that they originally promised 10 years ago, but like mechanically it's still not as good as it needs to be. The mechanics aren't fun. It really leaned more into this idea and this world rather than actually making it a fun experience to be inside of that world. And if you look at the maps with Battlefield, I think that's a clear example of them trying to do too much and not really understanding why people play Battlefield games. They do not want big maps. The reason why people really liked the big maps that there were is because they were rare, and also they were handmade and designed to fuel a specific mode rather than being the freaking volume, like in film, like volume. You can nail it as soon as it's used because of how they use it. They don't use it well. They just like, we're going to make a big map and then slice it up into smaller maps. But because we're doing that, we're not going to specifically design those to be suited for each individual thing.
Yeah, and also like I think that they really misunderstood the use of the size of the map, because like in Battlefield 4, the maps were big for that time, but if you make them bigger, so in 10 years from now, are we going to have maps the size of planet Earth and that's now considered good? I don't believe that is. I think it's just that during the time when they first started making the big Battlefield maps, that was big in comparison to like Call of Duty and the smaller like arcade games like Doom and like Unreal Tournament and stuff. So having a map in Battlefield that was bigger, people were like, damn, that's so much bigger than those other games. But they just kept exponentially growing them. And like, that's not what we wanted. We just liked that they were bigger than other games, and the Battlefield 4 maps are still pretty big compared to other shooters. I still play, those maps and go, damn, this is still bigger than every Call of Duty map. It's still bigger than all the Halo maps. Like, I think they misunderstood that. They just thought like scale equals good. Like, that's not how it works. It was just, we just liked the size of the maps because of the difference in other games, but you can go too big, as we've seen now. And hey, one map every game that's absolutely enormous is fine if it's just one, but like doing every map, that just does not work. And they clearly misunderstood that when they were making this one.
Well, speaking of maps, something that we didn't even cover is Season 7 said they were going to have maps, plural. And
look, I've got thoughts
that's
on that.
Interesting.
I've seen a lot of interest and like hype and stuff about that. And although I'm like, that's good, I would be embarrassed for them if they only did one map after that amount of time. But I feel like I can't praise them because the seasons have been 3 months and now they're doing a 6-month gap and doing an extra map in there. It's the same amount of work per time frame. So it's like, I can't really... I think they're trying to sell that as like, oh, well, you guys asked for multiple maps per season. Here's 2 maps. But it's like, yes, but you took 6 months to do it. So that is not what we want. We don't want... You could just not have another... Like season 8 could be in 10 years from now and they put 10 maps in it. That doesn't make that a good season. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, 10 maps in this season. I'm going to be like, why the hell are we waiting so long for this content? So I find it really hard to like... I don't want to be too negative. I think it's good. It's good that they're putting multiple maps, but I can't actually get myself to be like, well done, DICE. That's great. Because at the end of the day, they're not doing any more than they were. They've just spread the seasons out. So now we've actually just got a longer wait between the other content. And I guarantee they're probably not going to do more guns and more whatever else. The Battle Pass isn't going to have 200 tiers in it. It's going to have 100. So, yeah, I don't know. When I saw that, I was kind of annoyed at it. That it's like they made it seem like this huge positive. And it is a good thing, but it's like you can't sell that as a positive for the game when we have to wait 6 months for 2 maps. Like, that's just not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially after such a long amount of time. Like you're saying, 6 months in between projects is like... What are we doing here, guys?
Yeah.
Because it seemed like they accidentally did this. And I want to bring back what we talked about like several episodes ago. It was like, it feels like even DICE doesn't know when they're able to do like content. Like they're like, I don't know if we'll be able to do this or not. And then they find out that they can and they're like, oh my gosh, let's do it. And it takes them that entire time in between the first season taking place and that other season. So I don't know. It feels weird. I just don't quite know what the heck is going on with this game. I both want it to continue and I also kind of want it to die.
Yeah, I've gotten to
such
that
a difficult
point.
situation.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to say I want it to die because I've had, as much as it's had a lot of drama and it's hardly been perfect, I've had a lot of fun with the game and there was not really anything else for me to play in those 2 years. So it's actually gotten me through a long period of time of having something to play. Even when it was pretty quiet, it was still like there was something there. Mm-hmm. But also, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I just think they need to either really ramp it up or end it. Doing this where they stretch it out and technically speaking give us more content per season, but it's not more content per month, for example. Like,
yeah.
That's just only going to kill the game more. I don't want to wait till March and get 2 maps. And you know what's going to happen is I will play Season 7 and I'm almost certain the maps are going to be sick. They all have been so far. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be talking about that in March and being like, damn, this new map is absolutely sick. Both of them are awesome. Like, this is great. And then 3 weeks later, I'm going to be sick of it again because nothing else has changed. And if we then also have to wait another 6 months for 2 more maps or whatever I don't know, are they going to go from a 4-month season to a 3-month season again even though there's a gap in there, but like, I don't know, what are they going to do there? So yeah, it's just, it does feel like it needs to end. I don't like to say that, but it does feel like the game, they just need to do this as their final season It has multiple maps in there. Do something big to go out. Do like add a bunch of weapons, or I don't know, add like a Battlefield 4 map into Portal and into the main game, and just have like this big cool thing to end on, and just end it there. I think that is what I would prefer, just because I don't want to have negative feelings about the game like in a year from now, for example. I'm already starting to lean towards like, okay, this is getting really boring. Like there's nothing new and exciting. I want it to have a big end and then just we're done. Even though ironically that's what happened with Battlefield 5 and we all cracked this about it. But I think that was a little bit different. This one's gone on a lot
I think
longer,
the thing that's just really frustrating to me is the lack of clarity around anything. Like I if they're going to release updates, let us know how many updates, and then that's great. If they're going to end the game, let us know when they're going to end the game, and we can prepare for that. That would be great too. But now it's like each season we don't know if they're going to cancel it. And if you don't know this thing's going to continue, why would you continue putting your time in it?
Yeah.
And I feel like they had the surge in player base, and they had the stay of that player base, and they're like, crap, people are still really liking this stuff. Let's bring this up to the higher ups and see if we can get away with a 7th season. Like, honestly, that's how it's feeling like.
Yeah. It's also, it just seems like they didn't want that. I don't know if that's a tinfoil hat theory, but it almost seems as though they, not so much DICE themselves, but like the higher ups at some of the higher ups at DICE, and then mostly the people at EA and the higher ups there, might have seen those numbers and gone like, oh, god damn, we've got to continue supporting this game. That's kind of how it sounded or felt for me, that all that happened. And you'd think, I feel like any other company, right, if they have like this huge spike of players, they want to pounce on that. They want to go, all right, they're playing now, we need to hook them. We need to keep them here. They didn't do anything. They literally didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. They just had a bunch of new people. They even stuck around after the free weekend. And it's pretty much back to what it was now. I think it's dropped down to like, I don't know, 20,000 concurrent players on, like a daily peak now. So they've just kind of wasted that there. And it's like, if it was ever going to fully make a comeback, it had to be during that period, and they just didn't pounce on that. So that's kind of, that's why I think I'm leaning towards, I prefer it to just end, because if it was going to continue, they had to make that count and like hook those people in and start doing like constant events, and like, I don't know, you just got to keep people engaged. These days there's so much competition between Fortnite and Apex and Warzone, and now the finals and X Defiance coming out. Mm-hmm. Halo's doing better. Like it's kind of gone from a very dead period in the shooter genre to, it's still not like peak FPS era at the moment, but it's doing a lot better than it was like 6 months ago or something. So yeah, I feel like they just missed the boat there, and I personally just think I'd rather not have a sour taste in my mouth about this game. I'd rather them just do a big season 7 and it's all really solid, and they just say, and that's the end, and we're going to come back stronger with the next game. Because if they just keep doing this, if they do another like season of this and it's another 6 months later, and like, I'm just not going to, I probably wouldn't even play that. I'd be like so far removed from the game that I would be like, nah, I'm not coming back to that. I'll just play when the next one comes out. And that, I don't want that. I don't want to feel... Yeah. Battlefield's by far my favorite shooter franchise. I don't want to feel like I don't want to come back for a season. Like that's just a bad feeling for any game.
I'm right there with you, man. Again, I just want them to be frank with us and be straight up like, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what we're going to do. Now let's prepare you for the next game. Because I feel like if they keep on limping along on here, there might not be as much excitement around the next Battlefield game. Like, it could possibly hurt the brand there, but I don't know. We'll see. Battlefield, as we've seen throughout the years, has become a middling franchise. It started from greatness, but honestly, we're getting more crappy games than we have gotten good games at this point. And it's like, do they really know what Battlefield is anymore?
It does feel that way. It's definitely, like we said, I think that was in the last episode, that it isn't in that upper echelon anymore. unfortunately. Like, and it can get back there for sure. I'm not trying to be like, oh, the franchise is dead. That's not at all the case, but I don't see it as like a peak shooter franchise anymore, which is really sad. And I think it could have been won back with this game, but I think now they just have to really just end this one nicely. It doesn't have to end with a bang or anything. Just end it in a way that your player base doesn't hate you. And then the next one has to be good. Or then I think it genuinely is not a good franchise anymore, which makes me genuinely sad to say that. Like, this is my favorite. It's probably my favorite franchise in gaming because it's the most hours I reckon I've played. You know, you play this way more than single player games. So all my favorite single player games, I haven't played nearly as many hours. I probably haven't played as many hours of all my favorite single player games than I have of just 2042. Like, I don't want it to die off, but I feel like the way that they're going, it's, I don't know, they just have to nail the next one. And we've said a lot about like Vince and Marcus Leto and all those guys that are in the right place. I'm still optimistic. I'm not sitting here like thinking, oh, this franchise is done. Like, I really do feel confident the next one can be solid. I'm not thinking it's going to be the best Battlefield ever, but I think it can just be a solid like 8 out of 10. And that's all I hope for. Don't try to make it a 10. I want it to just be a nice, safe 8 out of 10. Just give me what we used to love about Battlefield. Do one cool thing. Do something, you know, the tornadoes and that didn't work in this game. But something at this point, something cool.
The bar is so low. Just release a game that is actually good. That doesn't need 8 to 12 months of updates to get the core mechanics fixed, and then another 12 to 18 months to actually make it a game that people want to play.
Yeah. They need to just, like, I'm happy for them to launch with not much content. Like, give us like 6 maps, give us like Conquest, Breakthrough, and Rush, and that's it. No Portal, none of that stuff. Just give us a very basic but very structurally good game. And from there, because like we haven't actually seen a good launch of Battlefield in so long, that if they can actually launch it in a stable state and then from there just put out constant content, and that doesn't need to be a map a month or something wild. Like, they don't have to be doing crazy stuff like that, but just keep us engaged. It doesn't have to be maps. It doesn't have to be the hardest things to make. Do like just little events and all that kind of stuff. I've seen it in other games too, that like, hell, even just the finals that's just launched like last week, it's like a Christmas event at the moment. The only thing they've done is put snow on a certain map with like a bunch of snow, like Christmas trees around and stuff.
Yeah.
Just a couple of Christmas bundles in the store, but it's at least something that we're like, oh, okay, they've cool update dropped today. They did a few balancing stuff, and then there's also some Christmas stuff. That's kind of cool. I'm not blown away. I'm not thinking like, oh, this game's just doing an absolute madness. I'm just content with what they're doing. I feel like even Call of Duty can do that to an extent where they don't really do anything mind-blowing. They just do enough that you're like, oh, that's pretty cool, and that's all I need to do. But if I say that's pretty cool once a month, I'm going to stay hooked. You know what I mean? But with Battlefield, it's more like I'm not saying it's pretty cool. Every time there's a map, I'm like, holy, this map is awesome. But
they keep on doing better on the maps.
Yeah, they keep then making me wait for 3 months before I can say that again. So it's like, I'm just not constantly hooked. And that's what they need to do with the next one, is just launch it safely, save some of that content. Give us only 6 maps and give us, like, save the other ones that they would have worked on for, like, season 1 and stuff like that. That's completely fine. I just think they need to just play it safe. And that's weird coming from Battlefield because they've never really done that. I don't think they've ever played safe, but I think that's kind of where we're at now. They just need to do that at this point.
See, I think the problem is they have been playing it safe.
Yeah, true. In the wrong ways, yeah.
They're not making the big advancements that they had been doing. When you look at Battlefield 3 and 4, those were groundbreaking when it comes to level of destruction. If you look at Battlefield 1, it was groundbreaking because that was the first game set in World War One, like big AAA game that was set in World War One. And then if you look at Battlefield 5, it was like, oh, here's the beginning of the safe bet of like, okay, people really liked Battlefield 1 because it was a classic war, not realizing it was because it was interesting and new, not because it was just old weapons.
Yeah.
Like people, there's a friend of mine, her dad was he's a veteran of, I think, the Vietnam War, and he loves historical shooters. He's 75, maybe even like close to 80. Bought Battlefield 1 to play that game because he heard about how good the historical accuracy and how much respect they put into that war. And then if you look at the difference between that and Battlefield 5, it was like, they're like, classic shooters, that works. Let's pick another war and let's just do that, rather than realizing, hey, it's because we did something different and new here.
And also, they literally said this is our interpretation of World War II, which is like, what the hell does that mean? Like, there is one interpretation of World War II, and it's the real interpretation. There's no other. If you want to do some full wacky like World War II, but it's kind of futuristic, like you look at like Captain America type stuff, where it's like it's World War II, but it's like they got like all this advanced tech and stuff like that. That's kind of cool. But if you're going to make it kind of just pretty similar to real life, but the only differences are there's a lot more women and then there's people that have hook hands, that's not interesting enough. That just makes people go like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? They just really didn't think that through. They made it historically accurate a little bit and then just decided to do their own random stuff, which I don't know why they thought that would work, but
yep. But let's quickly talk about some positive things before we end this episode. And let's talk about the year of Battlefield 2042, because I feel like this was finally the year where it didn't just randomly make some crappy decisions until later when they just like dropped off the face of the planet. But for most of this year, it was like each update was one adding something very interesting, and then also it was good.
Yeah, it was a weird year, wasn't it? It started very strong, and it was pretty strong towards the middle, and now it's kind of tailed off a little bit, but it did feel towards, I can't remember the exact dates of when season 4 was. Was that in the middle of this year or was it like the end of last year? I can't actually remember.
I think it was at the beginning of this year, right?
Season 5 was... season 5 would have been the middle-ish.
Yeah,
maybe
so
like
season
May.
4 was February 28th is when it came out.
Ah, okay. So yeah, like I feel like they started strong there because that was a really good season, I thought. And season 3, like you and I both know how we feel about season 3. So that was kind of the end of, or the beginning of this year that was still going on. Then season 4 was really strong. Season 5 was also really strong. And yeah, it felt like it was building towards something. And then season 6, I feel, has been a pretty big letdown. Even though I did like the overall theming of it and stuff, that it was the whole AI thing, and like Redacted's it's a bit darker and grittier, and it's like smaller map and stuff. I think on paper it worked. It just didn't. I don't know what really went wrong. Maybe it is just a longer season. Maybe if they had we'd actually be the end of this month actually. So roughly now, we would be getting the next season, I think. We'd be getting season 7 if it was a normal length season. Roughly anyway. It would be maybe like a few weeks from now. So maybe that's where they went wrong, because maybe that would have kept me hooked. But yeah, just definitely, unfortunately, tailed off because of that. But yeah, I think the start was genuinely strong. I for a minute there thought like, oh, damn, this game is actually it's going to do a Battlefront 2. Like, it's going to pick itself up and then not only sort of fix itself, but continue on. And it did for a bit there. It was definitely that 6-month period of season 4 through to the end of season 5 that it did really well. And it felt like it was making a bit of a charge there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the real turning point, honestly, is when we lost specialists in each update. That was like the first death of what was originally Battlefield 2042, and then the second death was when we finally had all of the maps at least better than when they got launched. But if we're looking at a positive spin on that, I feel like it's good that they went back. Like, what other game? You can take a negative. Like, what other game releases terrible maps so terrible that they have to go back and change them? But at least they went back and changed them, because even if there was a crappy Call of Duty map, there's no way they would go back and adjust that.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I think a lot of COD maps are just as bad, if not potentially worse, than the 2042 maps, and they don't go change them. So I do see it. People will use it as a negative and go like, oh, the maps are so bad they had to, we've never seen that. We've never seen devs go fix their maps because they were so bad. But I actually see it as a positive that they really cared enough to do that, because I think they should have gone and remade the last 5 Call of Duties in general. To be honest, they were that bad. So it's like, it's just because the other studios are stubborn, that doesn't mean that like DICE should be punished or criticized for going back. Or I'm not going to say they shouldn't be criticized, they should, but they shouldn't be criticized for going and fixing them, is kind of my point. I think that's a great thing. And even though it, to be fair, kind of felt as though it wasted a bit of time, that they maybe could have given us an extra map or whatever, but I do think it makes the game a bit more complete. I think if we still had all them base maps, man, oh my God, like, it is pretty mental. I think we do take it for granted. I know I do, that like, if we still today had to go back and play, like, even though I don't really love the new Hourglass, for example, if we had to go play the original still, I'd quit it every time. And to be fair, I probably still would with the new one. But like,
Breakaway, I still do with the new one.
Breakaway, for example, that genuinely is good now. And if I had to go play the original, I would just be like, nah, I'm not doing that. So yeah, I do have a lot of respect for them that they did that, because that is a big, pretty much accepting defeat like sort of situation from them. And they didn't have to do it. I've never seen anyone else do that. So they could have easily just brushed it off and said, oh, okay, those maps weren't good enough, or we'll just continue on with all the new content. But no, they actually put the time in. So I think they gotta earn a bit of respect for that, sure.
Yeah, definitely. And like you're saying, like, no other game development company would do something like this. Yeah. So I think DICE has well earned the belief that they have and they hold so dear to, which is the idea of like, yes, they can release a crappy game, but they can also put the work in after they release it to make it better. Mm-hmm. There's a whole different discussion there about like, should this be the way that they operate? And I think the answer is no, but at least they go back and they say, hey, yes, we know that we didn't cover this like it needed to be. We know that it released crap, and we're going to put some effort into making it good again.
Yeah. And I think I would rather as a company know where the flaws are. The flaws at DICE are clearly launching games. Like, they just can't do it, but at least they know that that's been their struggle, so now they can try to fix that. Whether they do, we won't know until the next game. They might just be like, who cares, we'll just fix it afterwards. I don't know. If that's the case, then that's a fault on their part, but at least they can make a change there, because if they do launch the next game well and don't lose the live service element of the team, it's going to be a good game. That is for certain. It's every Battlefield that's kind of sucked has turned into a good game. So if they can launch one good and then just add to that, it'll be, I'd argue it would be great if they can do it. It's almost like guaranteed to be great if they can do that. Yeah. Whereas you look at like Call of Duty, they don't really know where their flaws are, because they just keep launching pretty bad games. And I can't for the life of me actually put a finger on what they need to do. Like, they launch with a lot of content. They put out a lot of content afterwards. Technically, all the gunplay and all that feels good. Call of Duty feels good to play, but it's not fun. So I don't actually know what they can do to fix it. So weirdly, I'd rather be in DICE's situation where, they can pinpoint their issue and try to fix that. And like, hopefully that's what Vince and those types will do, is look at that and go, okay, clearly we need to fix the launch. So that maybe means delaying it by a year. That's probably the only thing the game needs, realistically. If they just make sure with the next game that has got time to cook, then I would be very confident it's going to be good. But like I said, with Call of Duty, even with like Halo, that game launched really well. It felt good. And I don't know where it went wrong. We can pinpoint with DICE games where they go wrong, and that's probably a blessing in disguise, really. Depending on if they want to act on it is the main thing. Because if they just do it again, if they know that that's an issue and they don't fix it, then yeah, that's not a positive at all.
Yeah. Hopefully they take, like we've been talking about, hopefully they take the learning experiences of Battlefield 2042 and move it into the next game, whatever that ends up being, whatever that looks like. I hope they take that and they do something good with it. But like we've been saying, I think that there's a lot of growth that they've been showing, that they have been putting in the work and they've been making it work. I just wish that they would communicate that more clearly around what they intend to do long term. But in terms of 2023, I think it was definitely better than 2022 from a quality and consistency perspective. Like I didn't have as many gripes with DICE as a company and their actions as I did with them in 2022. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I think just like the fact that the game was in a good state heading into the year, that meant that the focus was kind of the content instead of last year, even though the content was good, I just wanted to know what the actual fixes were so that the game would get better. Whereas this year it's like it's been more about like, and to be fair, towards the end that's been a negative because there's been not much content and not much fixes either. But early in the year, like when we got season 4, I didn't care about what they were trying to fix because it was pretty solid how it was, and then it was just all about the content, which all of that content has been really good. So yeah, I think it was a good year overall. I think it was a slow year, and it definitely wasn't a great year for the game, but it was a good year. I would definitely still put it towards the positive. I'd probably if I had to rate it, I'd probably give it considering the state of the game, I'd probably give it a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10 for where it started. That's not to say the game and the live service in general was a 7 out of 10 because it probably wasn't, but yeah, considering where it was, I think they've definitely done realistically as best as they could without like fully committing and bringing it, making it the sole purpose of the whole of EA or something like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say like probably a decent 7.
Yeah.
Not like world changing, but I'd say like maybe last year was like a 6. Still a lot of learning that they had to do, still a lot of stuff that they should have done at launch. And I'd say 2023, they finally got away from adding things that should have been in the game at launch and going and adding things that make the game better.
Yeah, 100%. That was definitely the difference. It was what we got was a bonus more than like a requirement for the game, essentially.
Yeah.
That's really what 2022 was like, just fixing it. Because we didn't get this, season 1 was like May of 2022. So like all before that was just fixes, and then even season 1 and 2 was just full of fixes. So like the whole year, and it wasn't just fixes of like, just a slight balancing on this gun. It was like adding freaking squad management and stuff like stuff that should be in there at launch, and unfortunately it wasn't. Even adding like the VoIP and stuff like that. How was that not there?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think that was the key difference between the 2 years was the game was in a good state and then they just added to it. Did they add enough? Probably not, but I'd still rather that than just like a broken ass game that we're dying for like just general fixes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Quite the time, but we'll see how 2024 does. Yeah. Also, podcast is still going on. Just may do some different things in the future. That's all I'll say.
Very, very keen for 2024. I think it's going to be a banger.
Yes. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this episode and for joining us for Battlefield Show throughout the whole year of 2023. We greatly appreciate you hanging out with us throughout all of the episodes, and loved seeing all the different thoughts and discussions had around the episodes and the stuff that we covered in them. Definitely look forward to the future of this podcast and all the fun that we'll be having in 2024. As always, we'd like to thank Ethan Clark for the beautiful thumbnail, all of you for listening, and we'll see you on the battlefield.